Okay, let's unpack this.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Today we are taking a comprehensive shortcut through the material on drugs affecting gastrointestinal motility. That's chapter 58 in our stack. And our mission today, it's not just to, list off a bunch of drugs. We want to give you the essential guide for how these agents work, the ones that either speed things up or, slam the brakes on the GI tract.
Right.
We're talking laxatives, GI stimulants, and antidiarrheals.
And this is really a deep dive into regulation. We're looking at two big challenges. The GI system failing to, evacuate things properly, and then the opposite problem. Things moving so fast you can't absorb anything.
So it's all about matching the drug to the problem.
Exactly. Are we trying to change water gradients, stimulate nerves, add bulk? The drug has to match the underlying process.
That focus on regulation brings us, I think, right to the most critical safety concept here, especially since you can just walk into a store and buy so many of these.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to start with cathartic dependence.
Yes. This is where we see a simple symptom turn into a really big problem. It happens when someone overuses harsh laxatives.
That constant stimulation.
Right. Over time, the local reflexes in the gut just, they give up. They become resistant to normal signals.
So you need more and more of the drug just to get a normal response.
Exactly. It creates this vicious cycle that can lead to chronic long-term intestinal problems. It's the core caution.
Yeah.
These are for temporary relief, not a daily habit.
It's a huge issue. Okay, so with that in mind, let's look at how the risks and the right drug choices shift across the lifespan.
Yeah, the clinical picture changes dramatically depending on the patient's age. Vulnerability is always our first thought.
So for children, what's the approach? The sources are pretty clear on this.
Right.
They stress that laxatives are not routine. You look at diet, fluids, exercise first.
Always.
But if a drug is needed, say for infants or young kids, it has to be the gentlest option. That's glycerin suppositories.
That's the one. Harsh stimulants are a definite no-go.
And for diarrhea.
For diarrhea, loperamide is the choice, but, and this is a big, but only for kids older than 2.
Okay, and for adults. The main concern seems to be that dependence cycle we just talked about.
It is. And for women who are pregnant or lactating, we have to be honest. The safety for most of these drugs just hasn't been established. After delivery, though, a mild stool softener is pretty common to avoid straining.
What about older adults? It seems like they're at the highest risk for just about everything here.
They really are. They're so much more susceptible to systemic effects. I'm talking sedation, confusion, dizziness, major electrolyte problems that can even trigger heart issues.
And they're often on other drugs that cause constipation to begin with.
Exactly. So for them, the agent of choice is usually psyllium. It's a bulk-forming product, so it works locally and has less systemic risk.
Okay, psyllium, we have to be really, really clear about the danger here. What is the one critical instruction you have to give a patient using a bulk product?
This is a life-saving instruction. Bulk stimulants must be taken with a full glass of water, at least 8 ounces.
And why is that so critical?
Because the drug works by absorbing fluid and swelling up. If you don't give it that fluid in the glass, it will start absorbing fluid wherever it is.
Like in the esophagus.
Precisely. It can swell into this gelatin-like mass and cause a complete obstruction. This is a non-negotiable part of patient teaching.
Wow. Okay, that makes it crystal clear. Let's move into the specific categories of laxatives then. The drugs meant to speed things up.
Right. They have a few main jobs. Short-term relief, preventing straining after something like a heart attack or surgery, or completely cleaning out the bowel for a procedure.
And they're grouped by how they work.
Yep. Chemical irritation, mechanical stretching, and then the osmotic water pull.
So the chemical stimulants, these are the fast-acting ones, right?
They are. They work by chemically irritating the lining of the intestine, which directly fires up the nerve plexus in the intestinal wall. We're talking about drugs like basacadil, cascara, senna.
One of those stood out as being almost too powerful. Castor oil? What's the big warning there?
Yeah, castor oil is a powerful evacuant, but it's risky. Clinically, if you use it a lot, it can actually block the absorption of fats and fat-soluble vitamins, your A, D, E, and K.
But the biggest risk?
The biggest risk, the absolute contraindication, is pregnancy. Its intense irritant effect has been linked to inducing premature labor. It is a very high-risk agent.
And a general rule for all of these motility-increasing drugs is avoiding them in acute abdominal disorders.
Absolutely. If there's any chance of appendicitis, diverticulitis, anything where you might cause a rupture, you do not use these, period.
And one other general tip.
Yeah, just good practice. Separate them from other oral meds by at least 30 minutes. You don't want them interfering with absorption.
Okay, so that's chemical. Next up, bulk stimulants, the more mechanical approach.
Right. Like methylcellulose and the psyllium we just discussed, they literally just increase the size of the fecal mass.
And that larger mass stretches the GI wall.
And that stretching is the signal that stimulates local activity in peristalsis. It's a more, physiologic way of getting things moving.
Now let's talk about the osmotic laxatives, the water pullers.
Precisely. If bulk stimulants use stretching, osmotics use tonicity. They use solutes to pull a large amount of water into the GI tract.
And that water increases pressure.
Right. That increased pressure stimulates motility. This category includes things like magnesium citrate, magnesium hydroxide milk of magnesia-lactulose, and polyethylene glycol.
You mentioned magnesium salts. Why are they a particular risk for patients with renal insufficiency?
Because unlike some other laxatives, magnesium gets absorbed into the bloodstream. If your kidneys aren't working well, you can't clear that magnesium,
Which leads to hypermagnesia.
which can be very serious. And don't forget, milk of magnesia is also an antacid. It can neutralize stomach acid and mess with the absorption of other drugs that need that acidic environment.
Good point. Okay, rounding out the list, we have lubricants. Their goal isn't really stimulation, is it?
No, not at all. It's just about making passage easier. They're for people who absolutely can't strain, say, after rectal surgery or with bad hemorrhoids.
And how do they work?
Well, DocuSet is basically a detergent. It mixes fat and water to soften the stool. Mineral oil is different. It just forms a slippery coat and keeps water from being absorbed out of the bolus.
But mineral oil has that same downside as castor oil, right? The vitamin issue.
It does. It also interferes with vitamins A, D, E, and K. And you have to warn the patient about the potential for leakage and staining. It's unpleasant but necessary to mention.
Okay, before we leave this topic, there's a really interesting niche category for opioid-induced constipation.
Ah, yes, a very clever mechanism. These drugs, like methylnaltrexone, are selective mu-opioid receptor antagonists.
But the key is where they work.
The key is that they are designed not to cross the blood-brain barrier
So they block the constipating effect of the opioids in the gut.
without touching the pain relief effect in the brain. It's a game changer for people in chronic pain management or palliative care.
That's fascinating. Okay, so we've covered local stimulation. What about the GI stimulants? How are they different?
It's about scope. Laxatives mostly act locally. GI stimulants, like metoclopramide, aim for the whole system. They work by stimulating parasympathetic activity or making tissues more sensitive to acetylcholine.
So it increases the overall tone of the whole GI tract.
Exactly. It's useful for bigger issues like diabetic gastroparesis, where the whole stomach is just emptying too slowly.
But metoclopramide works by blocking dopamine receptors. And that's where things get, well, pretty serious with side effects.
They do. Blocking dopamine helps with motility in the gut, but it carries a huge neurological risk. Dopamine is critical for motor control in the brain.
And blocking it can lead to
Severe extrapyramidal effects, Parkinson-like syndromes. The risk is really high, especially in older patients, so you have to be watching constantly for tremors, restlessness, any involuntary movements.
It seems like a recurring theme here is that treating a simple GI symptom can lead to a much bigger, more complex problem.
That's a very good summary.
Okay, let's totally switch gears. Let's talk about slowing things down. The antidiarrheals.
Right, these are for symptomatic relief. They work in a few different ways. Some, like bismuth subsalicylate, inhibit local reflexes. Loperamide slows down muscle activity directly.
And then there are the heavy hitters.
Then you have the opium derivatives, which affect the central nervous system. They're controlled substances and often mixed with atropine to discourage abuse.
Let's use a classic scenario. Traveler's diarrhea. What's actually happening in the body?
So usually it's a pathogen like E. coli releasing toxins. This kicks off what's called an intestinal reaction.
Meaning,
Activity above the irritation slows down, that's the nausea, and activity below it speeds way, way up. That's the watery diarrhea.
so for treatment, what should a traveler have on hand?
Bismuth subsalicylate is great for both prevention and relief. There's also rifaximin, which is an antibiotic that isn't absorbed systemically. It's FDA approved just for this.
But there's a key warning with rifaximin.
There is. You cannot use it if the diarrhea is bloody or if it lasts for more than 48 hours.
And for bismuth subsalicylate, there are two really important patient teaching points.
First, you have to tell them it will cause darkening of the stools. It's normal, but it can be alarming if you don't expect it.
And the second point is about toxicity.
Right. It contains salicylate, like aspirin. So if the patient is already taking aspirin, you have to warn them about signs of toxicity, like ringing in the ears, tinnitus, and rapid breathing.
And for any of these drugs, what's the absolute cutoff point where a patient needs to see a doctor?
48 hours. If there is no improvement in 48 hours, they need to stop the drug and get evaluated immediately. It could be masking a much more serious underlying condition.
Okay, finally, let's just touch on Irritable Bowel Syndrome, IBS. It's this tricky condition with swings between diarrhea and constipation.
Very tricky, and the drugs are extremely targeted. For IBS with diarrhea or IBSD, you have allosterone,
And that drug has a history.
a big one. It's a serotonin antagonist that was actually pulled from the market and then re-released with a huge black box warning because it can cause ischemic colitis. It's severely restricted, mainly for women.
What else for IBSD?
There's also aloxetiline, which is a mu-opioid agonist. It's a Schedule IV controlled substance.
And for the other side of the coin, IBS with constipation or IBSC?
The key player there is lubiprostone. It's a locally acting chloride channel activator.
So it works by increasing fluid secretion.
Exactly. More fluid in the intestine, which enhances motility. It's approved for chronic constipation and for IBS-C, but again, only in adult women.
So that brings us full circle. Let's synthesize the most important nursing assessments across all these categories.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you must always assess for signs of an acute abdomen pain, nausea, vomiting before you give any of these drugs.
And watch the electrolytes.
Always watch the serum electrolytes. And in terms of what you do, promote the basics. Exercise, high-fiber foods. Always give oral meds with a full glass of water. And be ready with safety measures like easy bathroom access if there's any risk of CNS effects like dizziness.
So the crucial takeaway is that the nurse is really on the front lines, distinguishing between, appropriate temporary use and a dangerous slide into dependence or masking something serious.
It's a delicate balance of modulating the body's own reflexes and fluid dynamics.
So we've covered speeding things up with laxatives, increasing overall tone with GI stimulants, and slowing things down with antidiarrheals. Here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over. Given the extreme steps the FDA took with allosterone, pulling it completely, then re-releasing it under such heavy restrictions, what does that tell you about the intense struggle between providing relief for debilitating conditions like IBS and managing potentially catastrophic risk? The whole regulatory story there offers a pretty fascinating look into medical decision-making.
Something to reflect on.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.